ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first Cyber Night session we're hosting in this series. Today we have Mr. Donald Bوردي to talk to us about 5G security. Mr. Donald is the Chief Information Security Officer in Huawei Technologies USA. Mr. Donald, the mic is yours.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be one of the first presentation in your Cyber Night series. And I'm sorry this doesn't give me another excuse to come back to Saudi. I would love to be there with you in person, but it's great to be part of this this virtual program as well. I want to talk a little bit about.
We will sure invite you back to Saudi when this pandemic is over. We would love to have you again here.
I look forward to it very much. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of partnership for the benefits of 5G and for cybersecurity assurance. And one of the good things we're seeing from the response to the pandemic is there are really some very important tools. And I think people are realizing some of the benefits that can come from 5G, but it really is a shared responsibility. So with the industry trends, the issue of 5G is not just about speed. We're talking about a platform for bringing computing power to the edge, to government, to private organizations, to individuals. A platform that will create and enable a digitized government, digitized industry, and help bring resources and benefits to individual citizens of the kingdom. So we have personal IoT, Internet of Things, smart city and all that's involved with it, a utility Internet of Things, ecosystem IoT. So it's things like fish farming, augmented reality, virtual reality, education, gaming, smart manufacturing, live action sports. Hopefully we can have sports where people can actually be in the stands soon. Robotic surgery and remote healthcare, we'll talk about in a minute. Smart agriculture, robotic mining, smart tourism. So fighting the pandemic, we have seen some activities around the world. For example, an intelligent robot that can collect throat swabs to protect the medical staff from viral infection. And robots can do other things as well, allowing benefits to come to people without endangering people. The sharing of information to manage the epidemic prevention, to monitor activities. And artificial intelligence-driven systems that can take temperatures while avoiding the risk involved with too many people gathering around. So for example, at Huawei facilities, we would have the temperature monitoring in the places where people would enter the buildings and common areas. And this can be done with robots as well. Artificial assisted diagnosis for COVID, for example, outputting the CT quantification results in seconds. So that way the medical professionals, where they are located, can analyze the results wherever the patient, wherever the potentially sick person is located, and to help monitor their treatment as well. Smart buses, the safety needs for public transport. It can help monitor for abnormal driving warnings and records if the driver he or she is doing something that's wrong. Security monitoring, monitoring the cabin for security, where the driver can do one push button to notify and bring assistance to the particular vehicle, whether it's a bus or a minivan or train or what have you. Live TV with ads can be part of it. 5G upgrades to the bus cameras up to high definition. The image clarity can be critical for accurate monitoring and artificial recognition in those situations where law enforcement needs to try to find someone who is a threat to the community. Facial recognition can be used using augmented intelligence capabilities. So the efficiency of the employees for product training or repair, the augmented reality that you see on the left, the before, what it would take people to analyze a particular situation or a piece of equipment that's not operating properly. So Now you can reduce, you see on the right side, the number of people and the amount of time it takes to diagnose a problem and to fix it. And generally regarding manufacturing, the efficiency of the manufacturing processes can be enhanced and improved on a continuous basis going forward to save money, improve efficiency, and accelerate products coming out of the supply chain. 5G services in public safety, the ultra high def video and augmented reality glasses. A lot of people think of 5G as simply the benefits that consumers get in being able to have fast things, to be able to use their phone to watch live activities or live events. But there's so much more about it. The 4K video in terms of monitoring your highways, your trains, your various events, the augmented reality glasses that can help whoever is wearing those glasses identify suspects in the crowd, can send alarms back, can help with monitoring of temperature, looking for people that may be ill. 5G promoting remote education. We're seeing an awful lot of distance learning in universities and colleges and community colleges and even various schools now. The ability to have really interactive communication between the teacher and the students with each other. So we've laid out on this slide some of the service description that's involved with remote interactive teaching, with the augmented reality, the virtual virtual reality, immersive teaching, and artificial intelligence teaching evaluation. Very strong network requirements for that. The industry prospect, as we move into the enhanced mobile broadband, the EMBB, real-time HD video backhaul for augmented reality and virtual reality. And we've partnered with a number of companies and gaining a lot of perspective about how value can be brought to individuals and organizations and what the technology, what the networks need to look like for this. So remote emergency treatment, there's been an awful lot of publicity about how this is done. So just take an example of ambulances. If your ambulances are connected by 5G through wireless technology, it makes it much easier for the medical professional in a safe and secure location to analyze the situation of a particular patient or injured person in the ambulance. So using the remote B-mode ultrasonography, it can guide the workers on the scene to perform the kind of treatment that may be necessary to maximize the chances that the individual can be protected and can begin the treatment more quickly. And this, of course, is information that is of course communicated to the emergency medical treatment personnel on site, so they're ready to seamlessly take the handover from the emergency personnel when the individual or individuals make it to the actual facility. So this is part of healthcare service connectivity, connecting hospitals and experts so that you can have remote image diagnosis, I mentioned, intensive care unit for virtual reality visits, remote surgery training, and in fact, remote surgery, personal digital assistants, mobile nurse stations, the kinds of connectivity that as you move from 4G to 5G are going to create a better experience and higher operational efficiency. And the network architectures for those are governed by very important standards informed by governments and private organizations. So as we move toward the benefits, and as you know, it takes a lot of work by governments working with private companies, a whole range of things that need to happen to help accelerate the rollout of 5G deployment. So the fact that these increasing capabilities are going to create greater dependencies by the different slices of cyberspace, the different digitalized industries and sub-industries. And so that means that there are challenges to cybersecurity and privacy protection. The technologies are going to bring tremendous benefits, but governments and organizations and consumers, they have to have an understanding of, well, what's the cost benefit of these things? What's the risk? And as you become dependent on things, you have to make sure that they're going to be there when you need them. So the increasing move toward the cloud is going to accelerate resource sharing and service platforms, and are going to be much more of a move from closed platforms to open platforms with a much greater reliance on open source and interconnectivity. Artificial intelligence and big data are going to power the in-depth mining of information. You're bringing the computer power to the edge and you need to access the data in real time. That's why, for example, the autonomous driving. Why with 5G, with the right kind of sensors in place, an alert can stop the car within a 1 centimeter distance rather than a 1 meter distance. So it also creates the capability to have more connectivities in a particular geographic area that can have high reliability. So new challenges, the traditional boundaries for protection become increasingly blurred. Data processing is more complex and the risk of data leaks is increasing. There's going to be more data, more important functionality, and that has to be there when we need it. And of course, the attack surface and vulnerabilities are continuing to increase, and malicious cyber actors in cyberspace, their sophistication is increasing, which creates greater challenges for cybersecurity, but also law enforcement and public-private cooperation and international collaboration with law enforcement. World Economic Forum ranks cyber attacks the third biggest threat in the world behind extreme weather and natural disasters. So highlights of 5G. 5G is going to basically facilitate everything. You've got the 5G network, phase one that we talked about a minute ago, the enhanced mobile broadband, allowing, and also massive connections, low latency that's going to bring these possibilities for connections in digitized industries and enable and help facilitate the growth of new vertical industries. So you see the triangle, and I mentioned enhanced mobile broadband at the top of the triangle, massive machine type communications, the ability to have multiple connections. So the EMBB is really the speed and the throughput, the amount of data that can come through in a short period of time. The MMTC, the massive machine type communications, is that within a particular area, you can have a whole lot more connections. So for example, in the football stadium, the soccer stadium, the individual consumers would be able to choose various cameras in the stadium to choose their particular instant replay and be able to see it in a high definition quality. The URLLC, the ultra reliable low latency communication. Latency is the amount of time for a response. That's what I was talking about with the autonomous driving and how quickly the car can stop when the signal tells it to. And you see in this triangle the various kinds of activities that are going to be enabled with industrial automation, mission critical activities, smart city voice, etc. So we're moving on an evolution to 5G. What they call now the non-standalone moving to standalone 5G. So the next 3 to 5 years is when the rollouts from 4G to 5G non-standalone, as you begin to get the benefits. You see on the bottom that you have the enhanced mobile broadband in the early phases of 3 to 5 years. So this is going to take some time. This is going to take a process. And the carriers and operators are going to bring this to citizens and organizations. They're developing now the business cases. What are the most important things that are going to be benefits? Because they have to make money, sometimes with support of government, but they need to make money, so they need to roll out those capabilities that are most important so they can get some value and not have to wait 3 to 5 years to get some revenues from this. And then the longer term, as you move into the eventual 5G standalone, where you not only have the enhanced mobile broadband, but you have all the various vertical industries, some of which were shown on the triangle, and that you are basically getting viral slices of cyberspace. So it's not just telecommunications, but you have particular activities. So the autonomous driving, you as the driver or the passenger, you want to be able to make sure that your car and the computer that's running your car is going to have access to the right kind of information. And you're going to want to make sure that the bad guys can't get in. So you need to make sure that you have strong authentication so you're allowed to get in quickly, particularly when you might go from one provider to another as you're being driven around. You need to make sure that only the authorized people can get in the slice. And you who are in autonomous driving or may need remote surgery, or your online banking institutions, or your healthcare, you need to make sure that only authorized people can get in there, and you're going to want to get in there quickly. So there needs to be these mechanisms to make sure that there's assurance and transparency on the ability to move between those viral slices and to make sure that those viral slices will be secure so that the data being encrypted with the enhanced encryption we'll talk about will be secure. And so you will not only be able to have the services that 5G enables be available, you're going to need to know that the information maintains integrity. The data on which the system relies has to be up and running. And confidentiality, you've got to make sure that your sensitive data is not exposed. And that's what the partnership is bringing about with these standards that are moving along the way towards standalone 5G as these different incarnations, these different business scenarios get rolled out. So in the next 5 to 10 years, as you move from the enhanced mobile broadband, you're bringing into play those vertical industries and the total cost of ownership reduction that I talked about, the business case. So open source is going to attract more vertical industry applications. This becomes a platform that provides larger bandwidth, more connections, lower latency, more cloud-based access. Reduce the expenditures. You've got to make sure that you reduce the costs. You need to have greater open source, greater interconnectivity, and you need to have intelligent operations and maintenance, because it's not just the cost, it's the servicing and the operations that have to justify it, so that the purchase price over time, the total cost of ownership reduction is substantial. So as the experts talk about, and I'm certainly no expert, but the 5G target network architecture in the future understands the different pieces, has particular standards and best practices for each, and the shared responsibility that different providers in that have to meet their particular responsibility. And again, that's part of what the government role is in terms of the government stakeholder, to try to make sure that the major providers serving companies and government and serving citizens are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that there's objective and transparent basis for knowing whether those products and services are going to be there, whether those providers are worthy of trust. So the new security challenges, the 3 from the triangle we talked about, the different elements, the 5G network architecture, the access, the transmission, and the core, all being critically important to make sure that you meet the information. Let's see if we can advance this slide. So the security challenges in summary: how to ensure business continuity on the 5G pipeline side to make sure it's going to be there. In the middle, how to avoid user data leakage in the 5G era of Internet of Everything. How to deal with the security challenges brought by these later phases, the massive machine type and the ultra reliable low latency, to make sure the services are there, that you can rely on them and your information is protected. But now we'll talk about the security objectives and countermeasures. As I said in the beginning, security is a shared responsibility. So you have across the horizontal axis at the bottom, end-to-end supply chain risk management. On the vertical, you have the same thing, enterprise supply chain risk management, that applies to all the key players who are contributing to the technology and the services. So one of the stakeholders are the service providers and the customers. They need to do their part regarding application security, and the service providers monitoring their aspect of cybersecurity and trying to enable consumers and educate consumers that they need to make sure that they're not the weakest link. They're doing what's necessary to not cause greater threats, to have a greater impact within the particular ecosystem. And so the application security is very important on that level. The operators, the deployment and operation security, making sure they're following standards and best practices to make sure that they have the ability to know that the products and services are worthy of trust, that they have the ability to respond when they see incidents that may be concerning. Then the vendor, and that could be, in the case of a Huawei or one of our competitors, it could be the product security, but there's also third-party service providers that need to make sure they meet their requirements, that they do their due diligence in terms of addressing the risk of the products and the supply chain risk. So the role of government, developing legislation and regulations, implementing end-to-end security supervision, trying to make sure they facilitate the use of market forces and not just regulations that may hamstring the private sector from being innovative, but trying to provide guidance and sharing information so there can be a continuous learning process so the technologies and the benefits can be reaped while the evolving security situation can be addressed. And then the standards organizations on the right here, that the importance of governments and private companies working together to make sure there are applicable standards that are improved over time as necessary, and to make sure there are conformance programs and independent testing of the products so that there is that objective basis for knowing what's worthy of trust. So 5G is building on 3G and 4G. And so with 4G, you have the various elements, and the participants in the 5G standards process have identified a number of the issues that can be improved. So the standards process looks for this first phase, the enhanced mobile broadband part of the rollout here in non-standalone, identifying what's the threat matrix, what are the issues of concern, to what extent are they not being addressed by the networks or others in 4G. And so trying to make sure that their new standards are identified that can provide security enhancements for the increased usability and dependency that we're going to have. So a number of things have already been done as we're moving along the phased rollout of 5G, moving towards standalone with the new business scenarios on the triangle being rolled out. New standards are going to have to be developed before those are rolled out. So in this first phase, we have enhanced algorithm. That's the protection of the information and the data. We have better air interface security. We have greater privacy protection. We have more flexible security policy with user-level security policy. Unified authentication, so there's a better user experience, but also provides the kind of assurance and transparency that you need. Then in terms of roaming, there's enhanced roaming security as well. And again, it's important for governments and private organizations to continue to participate in this process so that as before the business scenarios are rolled out, that the new standards are in place. And so 3GPP that's organizing and the collaboration with GSMA will be continuously improved for the various vertical industries in the subsequent releases of the standards. So we have a roadmap for the future of the 5G security. So the next step coming up on release number 17, the next step will be the ultra reliable and low latency communication. And then in a later is the massive machine type communications. So they're lightweight security mechanisms matching the low data rate transmission. So it's, again, critically important for this partnership to be this active involvement in information sharing. So we had release 15 of the 3GPP standards that did the basic security mechanisms, including identity authentication and the roaming security and privacy protection. And then release 16 are these enhanced functions for the vertical markets. They're going to be very important. Coming up, going forward, the further enhancements with the encryption, different authentication, and the same security mechanism used in different services, so you can make sure you have a continuity, you have best practices. The 5G security objective is to protect user data and enable network resilience and business continuity. And that's regarding the service providers, it's regarding the carriers and the operators, the equipment suppliers, all trying to make sure that the key elements of cybersecurity and user privacy on the right side are maintained. The confidentiality, the integrity, the availability, the traceability. Traceability is not what we talk about in terms of the pandemic. It's the ability to identify problems in hardware or software and the ability to go back through the supply chain to figure out where they came from. So for example, if there's a software vulnerability that's discovered, the integrator and in fact the user, like the operator, they have to be able to identify whether any of their products have the particular vulnerability. They need to be able to work with the provider to identify, okay, well, which products are affected by that, and how can we come up with a fix or a patch to fix that vulnerability in a timely manner, but make sure it's tested before the vendor provides it to the operator, and then they approve its deployment in the network. This is not the same as when folks look at their phone and maybe there's continuous updates of the software. When you're talking about the equipment of telecommunications, this is a very closely governed process for the telecom and mobile operators, and whether, how, and when they provide any kind of access or provide any updates that come from an equipment supplier. So it's a very well-regulated, very closely governed process, and the telecom and mobile operators are very careful to make sure that the equipment vendors don't willy-nilly put up their own updates, and they also make sure that the particular updates is tested for their particular environment to make sure that it's going to work and it's not going to cause any other problems. So One of the key parts of risk management generally, and of course 5G networks as well, is the idea of understanding the key assets and functions of the various networks and making sure that you implement unified and visualized management of the data, and you're managing the risk from your assets and your software and hardware assets. And that's why it's, again, why it's part of the partnership. The enterprise management system and the security management platform, both between the core network and the radio access network, the use of firewalls between the different levels to make sure that there's security protection, so that, for example, the core is not accessible from the outside unless there's really strict governance and permission being granted. So the key elements are the data assets. So you have to make sure that you maintain confidentiality and integrity. You have your hardware assets that include the firmware and the various gateway interactions. And then the software access, your radio access networks, enterprise management system, operating system software, open source and third-party software. So an overview of the security measures for equipment, one part of it. The device security model is laid out here. I won't drill into it in too much detail. So traditional security, you talked about access control. It's the ability to access the system or services or assets. Confidentiality and integrity, that's protecting the confidentiality of it. And integrity is making sure the data stays accurate. Because if you're relying on data, if somebody corrupts that data, the functions that you're looking for, the services you're looking for are not going to be available. Availability, the air interface, anti-interference, anti-distributed denial of service attacks, traceability, security alarm, monitoring audit, centralized log management, and so forth. So the increasing movement to the cloud. So the cloud infrastructure hardening, providing greater security. The virtual network functions, security hardening, key data protection, multi-vendor security. So challenges in the future as we move toward that rollout in the next 3 to 5 years. I mentioned the slicing, the virtual slices of cyberspace, making sure the authorization access and the effective isolation and separation is maintained. The multiple access computing, making sure there's appropriate authorization and lawful interception. That's the process where law enforcement all over the world, following correct legal process, go to the network or mobile operators with a lawful order to access the information. The telecom equipment suppliers, our responsibility is to make sure that the equipment, that the software or hardware from the telecom operator can interact. It's like we've got to provide the outlet, they plug it in to allow the lawful intercept, not something that we have access to. Network deployment by the operators is absolutely critical. And again, that's part of the shared responsibility. So standard security. So you've got the device security that has to comply with the security standards, such as the 3GPP I mentioned, that is the key player in developing the 5G standards, along with the GSMA, the mobile organization, and multiple government and private organizations in the world. And they have to comply with various baselines that would be required. So for example, in the case of Huawei products, we are governed by the laws of the particular countries that we operate in, laws and regulations. We also comply with the particular customer requirements that are specific in terms of their business objectives and risk environment. We also have our own internal requirements that we have to meet. So it's important that the operators ensure that the networks have been built to be secure and resilient. So there needs to be in-depth security, defense, and operations and maintenance. And that's why it's critical to have the right kind of security design and deployment to ensure the network security and the service continuity. It has to be there when you want it. So reinforcing data security protection and data security is part of the overall ecosystem, part of the shared responsibility. So collaboration with the service providers to make sure that there's the appropriate end-to-end data encryption and channel encryption for users, and to protect network data and basic user data throughout the entire life cycle of the process. Then of course, supplier management is very important. So those who buy from us has to be concerned about us and our suppliers. And we as a supplier, and sometimes in effect an integrator, we are very careful about the thousands of suppliers who supply us, whether it's hardware or software. So very strict requirements. And it's something that the community shares information on, again, as part of the partnership, to make sure that the requirements are firm and to make sure there's conformance so that we can know we're meeting the requirements, and those we buy from and government regulators or stakeholders also have that ability to know whether what we and what the operators are doing are worthy of trust. So in summary, 5G network security can be ensured by systematically analyzing, designing, and managing the 5G standards, the equipment, the deployment, and the operation. Three basic elements: the confidentiality and integrity, steeped in standards, the network device continuity, and security deployment and management. So in the security deployment and management, you got the security network design, security management, security optimization, all of which is very rigorous. I'll talk briefly about what Huawei is trying to do, informed by our customers and government regulators and our experience in the market. So our overarching security framework, security and privacy are critical to us. And we're moving from a cybersecurity 1.0 to a 2.0 in terms of, partly it's how we are using increased computing power to help us be more effective at raising our assurance requirements and being more transparent at it. So if we look at the far left column, we are, as one of the players, one of the partners, contributing to the 5G services standards and networks evolution. So we're very active in the 3GPP standards, for example. Network evolution, 3 to 5 years, I talked about that, and 5 to 10 years for moving as they fully digitize the vertical industries and reduce the total cost of ownership. So in the center, 5G security. So the security objectives we mentioned, to build security resilience. Resilience is the ability to make sure things are there when you need them, protect user data, and ensure service continuity. Security analysis methodology. We have developed very robust processes informed by some international companies such as IBM, certain specific procedures, the Astride technology, the NIST cybersecurity framework, the solution security, end-to-end enterprise-to-enterprise threat analysis, because just as 3GPP is doing their threat matrix, just as the European Union not too long ago did their 5G risk assessment, understanding what the threats are and then understanding what the controls are, the risk environment, and so forth is what's necessary to effectively manage risk and promote resilience. So security solutions, you've got various standards for security and device and deployment. On the far right-hand side, carrier network service security, and partly some entities are using something like the NIST, that's the US standards body, requirements for an organization in terms of their network security, such as 800-53 and revision number 5. So the idea of network planning and design, the engineering construction, and the operations and maintenance are all very important, and that's part of what we are focused on as a supplier. So for secure platform, you want to support fast end-to-end detection, response, and recovery. So these elements in this kind of the second level are from the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I commend to folks as a risk analytic tool to help an organization know where they stand in terms of their risk profile. But the idea of identify, you've got to be able to quickly detect problems, protect and detect. Security analysis platform, again, this able to use big data and moving into being able to use artificial intelligence are going to make it easier. But it's also important that organizations who have information on cybersecurity incidents and on vulnerabilities participate in the information sharing between governments and private organizations, the CERTs, the computer emergency response teams, and so forth, to make sure information is shared quickly so that organizations can protect themselves as threats arise. Security control platform, security policy orchestration and automatic response to attacks is very, very important. And that's part of why organizations participate in information sharing in various groups around the world, such as the FIRST organization, Forum for Incident Response and Security Teams, so that people can learn best practices and share information about how to improve and how to make sure you can get timely information, and the most timely information on how to mitigate risk and how to respond and how to recover. Bottom, we talk about proactive prevention, big data detection, and quick response. It's also important for organizations to do and nations to do exercises, cybersecurity exercises where particular incidents happen, how you respond. Just as, for example, for pandemics, it's important for governments to work with private companies to have exercises so that you can learn. You have after action situations so you can improve your processes. You can improve what we see here across the top, your ability to identify, to protect, detect, and response and recover. But by collaborating with those within your particular industry vertical and with governments, you strengthen the partnership to help us get the benefits of the technology while addressing the risk. So one of the things that Huawei does is we've developed a many hands and many eyes approach. So you see in the center here, number one, our R&D security, our integrated product development processes. As we build from the left to right, from concept to plan to development, building in the requirements for each step of the way. And using a process referred to as separation of duties, where the people who are responsible to meet the particular requirements are not the same as the ones who report to the managers or the executives as to whether or not they're meeting the requirements. And you also have internal audits for the same reasons that you have audits of financial situations, because this stuff really matters. And so you want to make sure that your requirements are being met. Second, the independent cybersecurity lab. This is a process where Huawei uses 3 kinds of testing of the tools, and it's an independent organization within the company that is set up to test the products to make sure that, under number one here, the R&D security, the IPD process, to make sure that folks have done the correct things that they're supposed to do, that they've actually met the requirements. And so we use 3 kinds of testing. We use third-party tools that we pay to use, of course, because no individual tool can find all the vulnerabilities in anybody's product. So we use multiple tools. And we also use open source tools, those that are readily available. And we also have tools that we've developed so that we can make sure that important vulnerabilities are addressed before the products are deployed. Third-party verification, we also have, and talked about it at some of the conferences I've spoken to and meetings I've had in Saudi. Various third-party verification centers, such as the United Kingdom, the Cybersecurity Evaluation Center. We have our Brussels Center, our Transparency Center. In fact, we'll be doing a webinar on May 20th with Bob Shee, who runs our Transparency Center, and we'll have someone from the GSMA and an academic cyber expert will participate in that kind of discussion. We're also very involved in industry certifications. There are a myriad of certifications, different certifications for different products. Different countries, different companies require different certifications, so we have to be responsible for that. So one of the things that Huawei is doing around the world is we're really trying to promote uniform and global cybersecurity standards and independent evaluation. So you think about it this way, that if manufacturers have to create a whole lot of different kinds of things for different people, it means their costs go up and their efficiency goes down. It's similar in the case of standards. And so right now, there's no individual standard, although for 5G, when I talk about the 3GPP GSMA work for 5G is very, very important. You need to have some basis at which the manufacturers can evaluate whether we're doing what we need to do. We can build those into our processes. And those who buy from us, the telecom and mobile operators, they know what the standards are, so they can put in their procurement requirements specific requirements and contract provisions and service level agreements as to what we need to do. So that's why it's so exciting, this work of 3GPP and GSMA, and this effort on the far left here, the NESAS, the Network Equipment Security Assurance effort, which is focused on telecom equipment, trying to come up with specific standards for telecom equipment that then we can make sure we meet, our competitors can meet, and those who buy from us can make sure they meet. But it's not just setting those standards, it's setting up a conformance program that's independent testing. So that way, customers, governments have an ability to know whether the particular products are worthy of trust. And you make sure as part of this partnership that there's a feedback loop. Information is shared so you can continue to improve the standards. And you have an ability to compete to make sure that you can try to outperform your competitor, because in the marketplace, you want to be able to sell your product. You want to be able to sell your service. Secondly, the importance of number of regulators and greater government recognition. It's important for governments to recognize global standards. And now governments will do whatever they want, but that governments can add additional enhancements depending on the business objectives of the particular use of the technology. and depending on the particular threat environment. But having a basic concept, a uniform set of standards, helps everybody raise the bar. I would also encourage the industry and academics to call on Huawei and our competitors, develop a set of minimum industry best practices for assurance and transparency. So we compete against each other. Now we compete informally, but compete against each other to raise the bar for greater assurance and transparency. And frankly, there needs to be more R&D, more research and development on the question of what provides assurance. How can folks have confidence that things are being happened? More organizations need to participate. There need to be more labs for independent testing so that folks around the world can benefit from experts who can test against these new standards. Common criteria is an international standard that's recognized by a number of countries. Different governments and different companies may require the certification, so it's not uniform, but the model's good, where there's a set of standards, and there's a number of labs around the world. I think it's 50 or 60 or 70 labs around the world. And if a product is evaluated in a particular lab, it's recognized. So the seller only has to get the product certified once, and then it can be recognized around the world. So let me summarize. So 5G is continuously enhanced, building on the architecture of 4G. There are enhanced password algorithms, better interface security, better air interface security, enhanced roaming security, and better user privacy protection. Huawei complies with the 3GPP standards. We provide enhanced equipment defense mechanisms based on the NIST standard, the IPDRR, to try to improve network resilience and ensure the security of assets. The security organizations can't develop standards for every single threat out there. So they try to identify and come up with standards for the most important, and then companies try to come up with additional enhancements, which becomes a good competitive differentiator. And it's really good when industry groups call companies together to talk about, well, what have you done and what have you done? And that can encourage everybody to try to do a better job. That's why the information sharing, that's why the partnership is so important. So as I talked about the importance of the carriers and the operators, in addition to the standards and the equipment, proper network security design, deployment, and operation security management are key to network security. Hopefully we'll move toward a world where there's greater independent audits of the operations of the telecom and mobile operators, and even perhaps the operations of the telecom equipment suppliers. Because when we care about something, we have independent audits. That's why audits of financial records, for example, audits of companies that are publicly traded get such great scrutiny, because we care about it, and that's how we can ensure that there's a basis for trusting the figures. So our strategies, it's been a primary task for us for over 11 or 12 years. We try to use industry best practices and informed by consultants that we've hired so that we can develop, design, deploy, and maintain our systems to defend against network attacks and implanting malicious software. We compete in the world market. And for us, our reputation and the reputation of our customers is absolutely critical. And so we would do nothing to interfere with that. And we invite calls by industry or other experts as to ways that we and the telecom and mobile operators can provide greater assurance and greater transparency. It's a great pleasure to be with you, albeit virtually today, and I'll turn it back to...
It was a pleasure, Mr. Donald. It was great hosting you, Mr. Donald Burdey, Chief Information Security Officer in Huawei Technologies. We surely started with a very good content and a very good session for the beginning of our Cyber Nights. And we look forward in hosting you again in Saudi Arabia physically very soon, inshallah, once this pandemic is over.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you to all for joining.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donald.